This is Sarah Malanowski with Empowered to Live Free podcast, and I am here just excited to talk about the next story in this series. We've been in a series about talking about what we have in our hands. What is it that we can do with what God's already given us? Because sometimes He's just asking us to take the next step, even before we feel fully equipped for it, even before we think that it's time. We have to be obedient, surrendered, and available to His purpose. And if He gives just enough light on the path and says it's time to move, it's time to move. You go with what you have. So we have gone through a story of Moses and Joshua and Gideon and Ruth. Like, we have had some really opportunities to see how different people have served the Lord with what they had. Now we're going to take a look at 1 Kings 17, and we're going to talk about a widow who is actually, she is out ready to make her last meal. There has been a drought in the land, and she is running out of the supplies to feed her family, and she has come to terms with the fact that she's going to make one more meal, and then they will go and pass away after that. So she's out to gather some sticks and get some just final preparations to go home and make this final meal, and then they'll pass away. And she's accepted that. But somewhere in the gathering process, Elijah comes to town, and he's been told by God that there's a widow there who will provide for you. So Elijah, in that boldness that Elijah has, tells the widow, go home and make me something first. And actually, right before that, Elijah stops her while she's gathering things, and he says, I need some water, I think it says. And then it talks about, I need some water, a glass of water. Would you just have a little bit of water for me? And she stops and she says, that she will. She'll bring him a drink. But as she was going to get it, he called out to her and said, oh, and bring me a piece of bread. Now, this woman has been preparing to have her last meal with her family, with her son is what the word says, but then later we see it provides for her family, so there's probably some daughters in there. But she is got this moment to go, am I going to provide this guy with bread? Am I going to stop? Am I going to let God interrupt my plans? And this woman is a Samaritan woman. She is not someone who normally would be provided for. Like, she's getting that extended provision. She's getting the opportunity to experience God, the God that she's heard about. Now she's getting to experience Him. Now she's getting to see Him come on her behalf. So she stops and she says, as surely as the Lord your God lives, she replied, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat and die. This is crucial. Like, she's in this moment of time where she's like, this is all I've got, and I have a plan. Like, I'm going to gather this together, go home, make this meal, and we're going to die. But sometimes there's an interruption to our plan. And the provision that God has for us is on the other side of us being obedient to the interruption. But if we never stop and give God access to that moment, if we never stop and say, okay, God, what does this interruption mean for my life? How do I follow through in this? How do I make myself available to you in this moment? We miss out on the adventure. You see, obedience preceded provision. If she was obedient, there was about to be a supernatural provision for her and her family. But she was going to have to address that moment in her mind where she's like, do I trust the God of Elijah? Do I trust the God that I have heard about, but I have not experienced? So here Elijah said to her, don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first, make a small cake for me from what you have and bring it to me, and then make something for yourself and your son. So he's saying, bring it to me first, and then go and make it for yourself. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord gives rain on the land. So he's talking about it's not going to be used up. But she has to have this moment of faith where she trusts the God of Elijah to go and make bread for him first, and trust that God's going to supply enough for her to make something for her family. And that what God says, that he's going to provide for her, that he will. And it says later, she went away and did as Elijah had told her, so she made the right decision. She took the interruption as an opportunity to see God move. If you've been interrupted in your plan, in your well thought out plan, and you're just like done with the interruption and kind of just moving along to your own rhythm, you might be missing out on an adventure. You might be missing out on something that God has that will be abundantly more than you can hope and imagine. But you have to stop in the interruption, let God tell you what the instruction is, and then go follow the instruction, because the adventure is on the other side of that instruction. So it says for the jar of, well, she went away, she did this, she made the food for him. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. For the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. It doesn't ever say that those jars were full. It never says that she goes to those jars and there was an overflow or there was an abundance in them. There was always just enough for the next meal. You see, God doesn't need to give you an overflow to take you on that next step or that adventure that he's waiting for you to take. All he needs is your obedience. You have enough. A little bit of flour and a little bit of oil can go a long ways in the hands of God. What is it that God has placed in your hands that's just enough for the next adventure?